Welcome back as we enter into, I'm going to call it a family discussion. It's kind of a bit of health, but it affects us in different ways. Bedwetting. In fact, affects 1 in 6 children between ages 5 and 10. That is quite a lot, and it can cause, obviously, stress, massive sleep disruption for both children and parents. And Dr. Michael Mole is on the couch to discuss the causes of bedwetting, to get to the root of it, and then offer some effective strategies to help manage it and improve the quality of life for the whole family. And please, if you've got any questions, weigh in. If you're experiencing something now firsthand, we'd love for you to share your perspective and any questions. We've got the genius on the couch this morning, 063-408-8863. Don't act all humble.
Who was himself a bedwetter, so let's just say this on both sides of the coin.
I absolutely love it, and thank you for saying that, because I think for a lot of people, the first hurdle you've got to get over is just talking about it, because it's an awkward, difficult thing, and the last thing you want to do is put your child on the spot like that. Why? Why does this happen, especially with older kids? You would think this is something that would naturally work its way out, but 1 in 6 is quite a high number.
Well, let's talk about what it is first. So nocturnal enuresis is the medical term, but bedwetting is defined as a child who wets their bed, who's got to be older than 5, at least twice a week for a period of 3 months. If that's your child, you have a bedwetter in the family. And to your point, 1 in 6 kids. Why do we think it's a lot? Because we think we're the only ones going through this. If you think of a class of 30 kids, 5 of them are wetting their bed, but no one talks about it because stigma.
And therein lies half the problem, is because the gems, the information that we need to mitigate, to do something about it, probably lies within that community. What's happening on a physical level? What should have kicked in at age 5-ish and hasn't when this is happening?
Well, 3 things essentially are the cause of bedwetting. You have a small overactive bladder that eventually gets larger and matures. Your body's not producing the hormone that it should to tell your kidneys, produce less urine at night. Something
Slow down.
Vasopressin, And the third thing is kids just have this poor sleep arousal. They just don't wake up. Now, those are all very natural processes that mature over time, which means moms and dads, children who wet their bed do it involuntary.
Please,
it is never
it's not a psychological choice.
No, it's not a child that's being, difficult, or, in fact, I loved what you said, it's not a psychological choice. We used to think there was a psychological component to bedwetting, a cause. Now we know that's not the case at all.
It's just a timing.
It's a result of bedwetting. There's lots of psychology as a result of, but it never causes bedwetting. Good point.
I love that. And we'll look at how you can treat it from those 2 different angles in a moment. But primary and secondary enuresis, what is the... so is this a sliding scale?
Thank you, Dr. Graham.
Thank you, I practiced enuresis a few times as well.
So primary just means, and that's the bulk of bedwetting, that's around 70 to 80% of bedwetters are primary bedwetters. It means they haven't been dry for a period of at least 6 months. Now, kids under the age of 5, we don't expect them to be dry, but from 5 years old, we expect there to be some maturation, and so for 6 months, got to be dry, all right? If they aren't, that's primary. If they have been dry for 6 months and then start wetting their bed again, secondary, and that's got a different set of causes. Diabetes, bladder infections, constipation, a number of other things.
Can affect that,
The bulk of bedwetters, primary bedwetters.
First step, what do we do? Seeing as this is going to affect the, the children to the degree that it will, and you mentioned the psychological components, happens as a result of, so maybe just broaching the conversation and understanding and making sure that they're safe through that journey, so they don't feel like the one that is making the big mistake or the reason why everyone's upset. And you can imagine what it's like waking up to that, starting your day with that kind of energy. So what kind of energy should we have as parents to broach this?
Said like a true father. Well,
like a parent.
So, I mean, that's the whole reason we have a World Bedwetting Day, is to do that, is to create awareness around bedwetting. What is it? The fact that it's involuntary. Never punish your kids for something they can't help doing. But secondly, to say it's actually something we need to treat. Don't wait, don't overlook, don't it'll be fine. Proactively deal with it. And there are 2 essentially things you can do. The basics, so avoid any fluids before bedtime. During the day, as much fluid as your child likes, encourage it. Encourage regular visits to the loo, but 2 hours before bedtime, no fluids, and actually 4 hours before bedtime, no dairy, for a whole bunch of kind of
other reasons.
And then just before they go to bed, let them go to the loo. Even if they don't want to, it just kind of forces that habit. So those are the basics, and as parents, we would naturally do that. But then the actual active engagement is to say, okay, so what more can we do? And there are two things. You can get into some medication and you can get into bedwetting alarms. Both have sort of similar effects. One relapses a lot quicker than the other. One takes a lot more motivation than the other. And the other thing, which is quite interesting, if I can squeeze this in, is in the past, there was this belief that wearing absorbent pants kind of prolonged the season of bedwetting.
Okay, for sure. Facilitated it, if you will,
exactly. Well, but there's been a fascinating study that's done recently by some world-leading bedwetting experts that showed quite the opposite. In fact, they showed that by stopping wearing absorbent pants, it had a limited effect on, slowing or shortening the bedwetting season, but it had a significant effect on the quality of life, something you mentioned right in the beginning.
The
better sleep,
effect, yeah.
less grumpiness, less tiredness, overall, no-brainer kind of stuff.
Just
so
a
that
little
was
bit of help.
That's new.
Yes, next minute you're going to come up here and say that flossing is no longer necessary or something like that.
Really?
Such a disruptor. I love that. I think as a parent, often we put all of our stuff on our kids, and something like bedwetting is we judge ourselves, we judge our children. There's a lot of judgment. Maybe that's the first step to take that out of the equation so you can be practical and do something that's going to help your child and help the whole family. Please, if you've got any questions, we're going to go deeper into what we can do to mitigate the effects and get to the root cause in just a moment. 063 408 8863. That's how long it took my brain to remember that number. Use it when you want any questions answered. We are going to sit on the couch with Dr. Mole for another session in a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we continue with a very interesting, and I would imagine for those affected, very important conversation with our favorite Dr. Michael Mole around helping our children and parents deal with bedwetting. Now, if you have any strategies that have worked for you, some life hacks, please share them with our family. And you can do that via our WhatsApp line. You can drop us a voice note, 063 408 8863. Likewise, if you have any questions. I keep going back to the psychological element, and I suppose that speaking as a parent, that's often the first point of contact where I feel like I get it wrong, is like just manage the situation, handle it a little bit better. So when it comes to the psychological knock-on effect, in your experience, what can some of the dangers be, and when do we need to kind of step in, and how do we do that?
Yeah, so such an important question. Quick throwback to Carissa, beautiful earrings.
I know.
Potty training and bedwetting, no connection whatsoever. So from a parental guilt perspective, where you kind of think, I messed up potty training.
You didn't get the foundation wrong.
No, so you're good. Psychologically, the reason we say manage and treat your child's bedwetting as soon as possible is the psychological fallout. So kids that wet their beds are at greater risk of depression, believe it or not, compared to kids who don't wet their beds. They are more isolated. They don't want to go out, have sleepovers, have friends over, because you can imagine what might happen tomorrow morning.
Yeah, for sure.
Poor performance at school and very low self-esteem. I mean, can you imagine? That's the worst thing you want for your children, and it's because of something they cannot
control. Yeah.
So you really, as parents, this is a big issue. And by the way, punishing your child for wetting their bed prolongs the season of bedwetting and increases the wet nights. So if I can say it again and again, never, ever
it's the opposite.
Punish your children for wetting the bed. It is not their fault.
I love that. And it exacerbates it, in fact. It intensifies the trauma, and it can get traumatic for little people. And I think both parents also, when you feel like you're just not getting it right.
Yeah.
Do different environments make a difference? You mentioned kind of sleeping out, those sorts of things. That's quite a drastic change. But can that make a difference in terms of where they're sleeping? Any dangers in kind of changing the locale?
So that comes down to the psychological causes of bedwetting. We pointed out that there isn't, so unlikely. But things like medication are great for kids who want to go and sleep out. So what medication does is it's this hormone that your body should be producing that you give to your child, and immediately they have a dry night. The challenge with that is it relapses. As soon as you stop the medication, they'll go back to
want it to kick in the body.
Yeah, exactly. And that just takes time because that's the natural maturation process. Whereas bedwetting alarms, for example, that teaches your child, that's a behavior modification kind of therapy that teaches your child to be aware that they're about to wet their bed.
Just to
and
wake
kind
up.
of wakes up.
Okay.
It takes a lot of motivation, 3 to 4 months before it really kicks in. But then when you stop that, there's no relapse. So,
Okay, well,
swings and roundabouts.
I suppose it's about choosing where you are in your phase of this journey. How do we go about making the right choice? And when do we know to speak to a professional? Because we're getting a lot of information here, which makes me feel I can be proactive. When do we know, okay, we need someone holding our hand through this process? And how do we know what approach is going to work for our child?
Yeah, so I think 2 reasons or two pointers to say this is time to go see a doctor is when your child is over the age of 7 and still wetting their bed. So we
Okay.
kind of give between 5 and 7 for that process to mature
For
and
those things to balance out.
physiology to kick in. The other reason I'd go and see a doctor is if your child is having daytime incidents. So remember, we're talking nighttime bedwetting only, but as soon as there's a daytime component, so wetting their pants during the day, daytime accidents, just always in the loo, those we call symptomatic enuresis incidents.
Okay.
And that's something you want to go and see a doctor about. That could be, as I said,
That's a knock-on effect
diabetes,
of
sickle
something
cell
else.
disease, a whole bunch of other things. So daytime incidents, go and see a doctor over the age of 7.
When it comes to the medication, I understand, because we had similar sleep issues. We were using kind of the controlling of the melatonin and what's going into the brain, and it works brilliantly. But then you realize at a point that you're kind of not empowering the child and the body to be able to do it for themselves. How do we know when to approach it with medication, and how does that process work?
So again, medication is supporting your child through this season. Their body's naturally maturing.
The body will do it. Yeah.
The body's going to do it. I mean, 1% of kids at the age of 18 are still wetting their bed. So for that 1%, that's terrible, but 99% of kids, it's going to resolve spontaneously. So that's what medication does. It doesn't cure it, it doesn't take it away. It just, for that season that they're wetting their bed, allows them to have dry nights, which is improved sleep, less tiredness. It's the same effect that absorbent pants will have on your child.
I love that, just to mitigate the knock-on effect so that there is a lot less trauma.
And I think to tell your kids we're doing something about this. It's not something like, that's a bit odd. And because often a brother or sister isn't wetting their bed, and now here's this child that is, and what's wrong with me? And I mean, in our family there was a rule of we don't shame. We talk about it, we deal with this, we're going to get through this together. And again, let your child know they are not alone. One in six kids. That's a lot of kids that are wetting their beds. And again, for moms and dads to also know that there's, because it's often we feel shame and we project that onto our kids.
For sure.
And if you know it's not your kid's fault, it's common in South Africa, and they should never be punished. I think that's the biggest lesson here.
The perfect jumping off point. A little less judgment, I think, all round will definitely help out. And then the joy is you start to get, I want to say my age, but our age, and then it starts working in reverse again, and then you're getting up at 4 in the so you can match your bathroom
that's
breaks.
we could talk about.
That's for next Tuesday's health discussion. I think the bottom line is keep the baggage at the door. Don't put your baggage on your child. Get practical about it. You can do something about it. Clearly, there are some very practical steps. Just look after each other through the process.